If your family has been in California for more than a generation or two, there's a real chance your grandparents or great-grandparents passed through one of these towns, or lived in one without knowing it would disappear. California has over 300 ghost towns. We're counting down 12 that once had thousands of people before one single event erased each of them. One is sitting at the bottom of San Francisco Bay right now, sinking into the mud, and the only way to see it is from a train. Stay for number 3, it'll completely change how you think about LA. Number 12, Port Chicago, Contra Costa County. 35 miles northeast of San Francisco, on the southern shore of Suisun Bay, there was a town called Port Chicago, population around 1,500, families, a main street, a post office that had been running since 1931. Nothing remarkable about it except its location, directly next to a U.S. Navy munitions loading facility built in 1942 to supply the Pacific War. The Navy needed men to load the ships. The men they assigned to the job were almost exclusively black enlisted sailors, untrained in munitions handling, given no safety instruction, and placed under officers who had turned the loading operation into a competition. White officers placed bets on which crew of black sailors could load the most tonnage in a shift. On the night of July 17, 1944, 2 ships sat at the dock. The SSEA Bryan, loaded with 4,600 tons of bombs and ammunition, and the SS Quinault Victory, preparing for her maiden voyage. At 10:18 p.m., the Bryan detonated. The explosion was the deadliest homefront disaster of World War II. The seismic shockwave was felt as far away as Nevada. A pillar of fire and smoke rose more than 2 miles into the sky. A pilot flying at 9,000 feet reported chunks of white-hot metal flying past him. The Bryan was vaporized. The Quinault Victory was spun into the air. Its bow launched 500 feet across the bay. Every building in Port Chicago was damaged or destroyed. 320 people were killed instantly, 2/3 of them black Americans, accounting for 15% of all black military deaths in the entire war. Of the 320 dead, the remains of only 51 were ever identified. A month later, 258 black sailors refused orders to return to the same dock under the same conditions with no safety changes. The Navy charged 50 of them with mutiny. Thurgood Marshall attended the trial and called it what it was, the Navy itself on trial. The men were convicted and sentenced to 15 years each. The injustice drew national attention and directly contributed to President Truman's 1948 executive order desegregating the armed forces. As for the town, the Navy rebuilt the base after the explosion. Then, in 1968, the federal government purchased every property in Port Chicago and demolished every building to create a safety buffer zone around the Concord Naval Weapons Station loading docks. The post office closed in 1969. The town was physically erased. A national memorial now marks the site of the blast. The town of Port Chicago no longer exists, not because of poverty or neglect, but because the government that had already sacrificed its residents decided to take the land too. Number 11, Bodie, Mono County. In 1879, Bodie was the most lawless city in California, maybe in the country. W.S. Bodie, a prospector from Poughkeepsie, New York, found gold in the eastern Sierra Nevada hills in 1859. He died in a blizzard that same winter, never knowing what would be named after him. The town spelled his name wrong from the start. Legend says a sign painter made the error and no one bothered fixing it. For nearly 2 decades, Bodie was just a miner camp. Then in 1876, a mine cave-in exposed a massive new vein of ore, and within 3 years, the population exploded to somewhere between 7,000 and 10,000 people. Bodie became the 3rd largest city in California. By 1880, the town had 65 saloons, 2 churches, a red light district, a Chinatown, a bowling alley, and a murder rate that prompted newspapers across the state to call it a sea of sin. When the town went an entire week without a killing in 1881, journalists sarcastically declared it a quiet summer resort. Stagecoaches were robbed on the way in. Men were shot in the street over card games. One Methodist minister described it as lashed by the tempests of lust and passion. A young girl whose family was moving to Bodie supposedly wrote in her diary, "Goodbye, God, I'm going to Bodie." The miners pulled $34 million in gold out of those hills, close to $1 billion in today's value. The decline started in the 1880s as the richest ore ran out. A fire burned the business district in 1892. Prohibition and the Depression finished most of what was left. By 1930, Bodie was the best-preserved ghost town in the American West. Most buildings were still wooden. Then, in 1932, a 2.5-year-old boy playing with matches started a fire that destroyed 95% of the business district. The few people still holding on didn't rebuild. The last mine closed in 1942 under a wartime federal order shutting down non-essential gold mining. By then, only a single caretaker remained. In 1962, the state of California declared Bodie a state historic park and established a preservation policy called Arrested Decay. Nothing in Bodie is restored, nothing is improved. The park rangers are instructed to maintain what exists exactly as it was found: peeling wallpaper, dusty dishes still on the shelves, a 1927 Dodge truck rusting in a garage. About 110 structures still stand. 200,000 people visit every year, and there is a curse. Anyone who removes so much as a pebble from Bodie is said to receive bad luck until they return it. Park rangers keep a file of letters from people mailing objects back from across the country, begging forgiveness. Number 10. Manzanar, Inyo County. The town of Manzanar was founded in 1910 in the Owens Valley, east of the Sierra Nevada. The name means apple orchard in Spanish, and that is exactly what it was. A farming community built around fruit orchards in one of the most beautiful stretches of valley in California, with views of Mount Whitney to the south and the White Mountains to the east. By the 1910s, it had a post office, a school, a general store, and a few hundred residents who had built something modest but real. Then, the city of Los Angeles bought the land. The Los Angeles Aqueduct, completed in 1913, had already begun draining Owens Valley of its water supply, diverting river flow 233 miles south to sustain LA's growth. In dry years, the city pumped groundwater aggressively. Owens Valley ranchers fought back, at one point literally dynamiting sections of the aqueduct, but the city had the money, the lawyers, and the political power. One by one, farms failed. By 1929, Manzanar was abandoned. The orchards went untended. Los Angeles owned the land. The town sat empty for 13 years. Then on February 19, 1942, 10 weeks after Pearl Harbor, President Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066, authorizing the forced removal of all people of Japanese ancestry from the West Coast. The government needed a place to put them. Manzanar was empty. The land already belonged to the federal government by lease from Los Angeles, and it was remote enough that no one would complain about what happened there. By March 1942, the first Japanese Americans began arriving. Within months, over 10,000 people were confined to 36 square blocks behind barbed wire and guard towers. They had been given 1 week to abandon their homes, businesses, and belongings. Many sold everything they owned at catastrophic losses. Some had nowhere to send their property and walked away from it entirely. At Manzanar, they lived in tar paper barracks in one of the harshest desert climates in California. Temperatures above 100 degrees in summer, dust storms that buried everything, freezing nights in winter. They built gardens, they organized schools, they published a newspaper. 150 people died there. On November 21, 1945, the last internees left. The government auctioned off the barracks, the apple trees from the original 1910 orchards, the ones the farming community had planted, were still producing fruit. Former internees picked the apples. Today, the site is a National Historic Site. The stone sentry posts built by the internees still stand at the entrance. The orchard is still there. Number 9. Bombay Beach, Imperial County. Frank Sinatra performed here. So did the Beach Boys. In the 1950s and early 1960s, Bombay Beach was where Southern California went on vacation, a resort community on the Salton Sea, which was then the largest lake in California and the most improbable body of water in the American West. The Salton Sea didn't exist before 1905. It was an accident. An irrigation canal diverting water from the Colorado River into the Imperial Valley failed catastrophically, and for 18 straight months, with no way to stop it, the river poured unchecked into the Salton Sink, a natural depression in the desert 228 feet below sea level. The result was a 35-mile-long, 15-mile-wide inland sea. The federal government eventually stopped the flooding, and the sea remained. Engineers discovered it had a stable water supply from agricultural runoff. Fish thrived. Birds arrived by the million on the Pacific Flyway. By the 1950s, the Salton Sea had a yacht club, multiple marinas, fishing tournaments, and resort hotels. Bombay Beach was the jewel of the eastern shore, selling vacation lots as fast as developers could stake them. Then, the sea started dying. Agricultural runoff brought fertilizers, pesticides, and salt. With no outlet, the water grew saltier every decade. By the 1970s, fish began dying by the millions. The stench of decay rose over the shoreline. Tourism collapsed. In 1976, Hurricane Kathleen, a rare tropical storm reaching Southern California, drove the water level up 8 feet in hours, putting the south end of Bombay Beach completely underwater. The following year, another storm finished what the first had started. Developers abandoned partially built housing tracts. Families left in the middle of the night. The part of town closest to the beach never came back up. It remains flooded and mud-covered today, houses half buried, street signs rusting at angles, the pier going nowhere. A few hundred people still live in Bombay Beach. The closest gas station is 20 miles away. The beach, if you can call it that, is made of the pulverized bones of dead fish, white and fine as sand, but not sand at all. The Salton Sea continues to shrink. Scientists project that within decades, as the water level drops further, the exposed lakebed, saturated with decades of agricultural toxins, will become a source of toxic dust blowing across the Coachella Valley. Bombay Beach is 223 feet below sea level, the lowest inhabited community in the United States. If you haven't subscribed yet, do it now. We do California history like this every week. Number 8. Llano del Rio, Los Angeles County. 45 miles northeast of Los Angeles on Highway 138, in the Antelope Valley Desert, there are stone ruins in the Joshua trees. Most people drive past without slowing down. Those ruins are what is left of the most ambitious political experiment in California history, a socialist utopia that nearly worked. Job Harriman had almost been mayor of Los Angeles. In 1911, he ran as a socialist and was on track to win until 2 days before the election, the McNamara brothers confessed to bombing the Los Angeles Times building, the same bombing Harriman had been publicly defending as a frame-up. The confession destroyed him overnight and handed the election to his opponent. Harriman chose a different approach. If he could not change Los Angeles from the inside, he would build a new city from scratch and show the world a better way. On May 1, 1914, May Day, Harriman and a group of fellow socialists broke ground in the Antelope Valley. They purchased 9,000 acres, recruited members from across the country through their magazine, and began building from nothing. By 1916, nearly 1,000 people lived at Llano del Rio. They had a hotel, a school, a print shop, a sawmill, a cannery, a dairy, an orchestra, and a mandolin club. Children raised their own chickens. Wages were held in common. They grew crops and sold the surplus. Aldous Huxley later described it as a genuine attempt to demonstrate that socialist life was not a dream. There was a problem the founders had refused to seriously face. The Antelope Valley Desert received an average of 9 inches of rain a year. The only local water source was Big Rock Creek, an intermittent stream that could not sustain 1,000 people, plus the expansion Harriman kept promising. In July 1916, the California Commissioner of Corporations denied the colony's application to dam Big Rock Creek, citing insufficient funds and experience. Without a dam, there was no water. Without water, there was no farm. Without the farm, there was no commune. A Christian socialist investor had also been quietly buying up company shares to seize control, and the resulting legal chaos pushed the Llano del Rio company into bankruptcy by 1918. Harriman packed up with 60 families and relocated the experiment to Louisiana, where it survived until 1937. Within 24 hours of the last colonist leaving California, neighbors had stripped the wooden buildings down to the foundations, hauling away every plank and nail. What they could not carry, a concrete silo, a rock chimney, a fragment of a wall. They left standing. Harriman returned to Los Angeles penniless and died there in 1925. California Historical Landmark, number 933, sits along Highway 138 with no sign pointing to it. The ruins are in a field next to the road. Number 7, Whiskey Flat, Old Kernville, Kern County. This town had 4 names. First, there was Rogersville, named after the man chasing a mule who stumbled across the Big Blue Mine in 1858 and sparked a gold rush. Then Williamsburg, when enough people arrived to want something that sounded proper. Then Whiskey Flat, when someone opened a saloon by laying a board across 2 whiskey barrels and the town decided to be honest about its identity. Then in 1864, women and families moved in and renamed it Kernville because no decent town could have whiskey in its name. Whiskey Flat, Kernville, grew into a real town. Hundreds of buildings, a main street, enough character that Hollywood found it. The Kern River Valley became a backdrop for westerns from the 1920s onward, and the town built a movie street expressly for film crews. John Wayne's Ringo Kid rode through Kern River Canyon in John Ford's Stagecoach in 1939, the film that won the Best Picture Oscar. Gene Autry, Hopalong Cassidy. Stories of Kernville's gunslingers and outlaws are said to have loosely inspired Clint Eastwood's characters decades later. After World War II, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers selected the Kern River Valley as the site for a flood control and water storage reservoir. The town of Kernville sat directly in the proposed lake bed. The government bought the land through eminent domain. Residents negotiated their prices and moved to higher ground nearby, building a new Kernville a few miles upstream. Before the water came, crews dynamited most of the buildings: the school, the church, the jail, the general store. Whatever couldn't be moved was detonated. The Isabella Dam was completed in 1954. The lake rose. Whiskey Flat went under. During the 2021 and 2022 droughts, Lake Isabella dropped to 8% of its capacity. The foundations of the old town emerged from the mud for the first time in 70 years. The jail foundation, the church footprint, horseshoes on the dry lake bed. Retired film producer Chuck Barbie, who had lived in the valley his whole life, walked the old site and told a reporter, "There are still stories of an untold Old West here. You can still see what it was like when the first settlers came in 1861. Then the rains returned and Whiskey Flat went back under. It's down there now." Number 6, Cerro Gordo, Inyo County. 8 miles up a dirt road at 8,500 feet in the Inyo Mountains above the dry bed of Owens Lake, there is a ghost town that funded the growth of Los Angeles. Most Angelinos have never heard of it. Cerro Gordo, Fat Hill in Spanish, was a silver camp worked informally by Mexican miners in the 1860s. In 1868, a businessman named Mortimer Belshaw arrived, built the first real road up the mountain, installed a superior smelter, and ran the road as a private toll operation so he could control every ounce of silver that came down. By 1869, Cerro Gordo was the largest producer of silver and lead in the entire United States. Mule teams hauled silver bullion 275 miles to Los Angeles, and when the wagon trains couldn't keep pace with production, Belshaw commissioned a small steamboat, the Bessie Brady, to haul bullion bars across Owens Lake. By 1872, the town had over 4,000 residents. Mines operated 24 hours a day. Smelters worked in shifts. Murder was a weekly event. The Los Angeles News wrote in February 1872, "To this city, Cerro Gordo trade is invaluable. What Los Angeles is now is mainly due to it. It is the silver cord that binds our present existence. Should it be unfortunately severed, we would inevitably collapse." This was not an exaggeration. The silver from Cerro Gordo was, for several years, the primary reason Los Angeles survived as a settlement at all. By 1877, the richest ore bodies were depleted. A fire burned through the Union Mine. Silver prices collapsed. By 1888, the town had 30 or 40 people picking through what was left. There were revivals. Zinc was found in 1907, and mining continued in fits through 1949, but nothing like the original boom. In 2018, a former high school teacher named Brent Underwood and a group of friends bought the entire ghost town for $1.4 million. In June 2020, the American Hotel, 149 years old, one of the last original structures, burned to the ground in a suspected electrical fire. Underwood was living there alone at the time. He rebuilt it anyway. He still lives there. You can visit by appointment. Number 5. Old Shasta, Shasta County. In 1849, the Queen City of Northern California was not San Francisco. It was a mining town called Shasta, 3 miles west of where the city of Redding sits today. At its peak in the early 1850s, Old Shasta was the commercial hub of the entire northern mining district, the largest row of brick buildings north of San Francisco, nearly a mile of continuous storefronts along a single street. Gold from the Trinity and Klamath rivers passed through here. Miners came here to resupply, to drink, to deposit their earnings. The county courthouse was here. Wells Fargo was here. The Masonic Lodge, 14 general stores, hotels, newspapers, a Chinese district. Old Shasta processed more gold in the early 1850s than almost anywhere in California. 2 things killed it. The gold rush on the northern rivers ran out of easy pickings, faster than anyone expected. And then the California and Oregon Railroad, building its line south from Oregon, had to decide exactly where to route the tracks through Shasta County. The railroad selected a path that bypassed Old Shasta entirely, passing through a wide flat valley to the east that was cheaper to grade and easier to engineer. The stop the railroad built there was originally called Poverty Flats. Then they renamed it Redding, after a company official. Once Redding had the railroad, it had everything. Merchants followed the tracks. The county seat was transferred. Old Shasta's population dropped from over 2,000 to near zero within a few years. The brick storefronts remained standing. Brick buildings rarely collapse on their own, but they were stripped of glass and interior fixtures and left roofless. The California sun and rain finished the rest. The ruins of Old Shasta's main street stand today as a California State Historic Park. The courthouse, restored, still displays its original gallows. Behind the main street, the hillside cemetery contains the graves of gold rush prospectors from dozens of countries who came to California, found some version of what they were looking for, and never went home. The cemetery is still in use. Old Shasta's brick walls have been standing empty for over 150 years. Number 4. Calico, San Bernardino County. In 1881, a prospector named Hughes Thomas found silver in the Calico Mountains in the Mojave Desert, 20 miles northeast of Barstow. Within 2 years, Calico was a city of 3,500 people and the most productive silver mining operation in California. 500 mines, a post office, newspapers, hotels, saloons, a school, a Sunday school, and a red light district on a street politely called C Street. The Calico mine alone produced over $13 million in silver over its operating life, equivalent to hundreds of millions today. Then, in 1893, the federal government repealed the Sherman Silver Purchase Act, which had required the U.S. Treasury to buy large quantities of silver each year to prop up the price. The silver price collapsed almost immediately. Mines that were marginally profitable became unprofitable overnight. Mines that were profitable became less so by the month. The price dropped, kept dropping, and never recovered to Calico-era levels. By 1896, the silver was still in the ground, but no one could afford to extract it at the prices available. Calico was abandoned in fewer than 3 years. It sat empty for 50 years. Then in 1951, Walter Knott, the Southern California businessman who had built Knott's Berry Farm into the country's first theme park, purchased the ruins of Calico and began restoring them. Knott had grown up in San Bernardino County. He considered Calico part of California's heritage. He restored the main street, rebuilt several structures, and in 1966 donated the entire property to San Bernardino County. Today, Calico operates as a county park and a tourist attraction. You can pan for gold, ride a narrow-gauge train, and walk into a working replica mine. It is one of the most visited ghost towns in the American West. The original silver is still in the ground. No one has found an economical way to get it out. Number 3. Drawbridge, Santa Clara County. There is a ghost town in San Francisco Bay that you can only visit from a train that doesn't stop. In 1876, the South Pacific Coast Railroad built a narrow-gauge line connecting the East Bay to San Jose. The route crossed 2 navigable waterways, Mud Slough and Coyote Creek, requiring drawbridges. The railroad built a small cabin on the island between the bridges to house the bridge tender who cranked the spans open and closed for passing boat traffic. That cabin was the beginning of drawbridge. Duck hunters found the island, then fishermen. By the 1900s, the island, accessible only by rail, had developed a reputation as a place to disappear for a weekend. No roads, no mayor, no police, no municipal government of any kind. Bootleggers operated openly during Prohibition. The Sprung Hotel served duck dinners and rented rooms and charged 25 cents for homebrewed dark beer when the law specifically forbade it. On a good weekend in the 1920s, 600 people crowded onto an island that was reachable only by a train that stopped there 5 times a day. 80 to 90 structures stood on wooden stilts above the marsh, each with its own rowboat tied beneath the porch. Then, the South Bay started pumping groundwater. Post-World War II development across the region tapped the aquifer beneath the marsh. The wells at Drawbridge ran DRI. Without the water table to support it, the island began to sink. By the 1950s, high tides were occasionally coming through floorboards. One former resident recalled cooking in galoshes, with a fish swimming in and out of her kitchen. The railroad stopped making stops at Drawbridge in 1955. No more visitors. With fewer residents, vandalism increased. The San Jose Mercury News began running stories declaring Drawbridge a ghost town while people still lived there, which attracted thieves who broke into occupied houses looking for abandoned valuables. One resident, Charlie Luce, had his windows shot out repeatedly. He stayed anyway. He was the last one. In 1979, Charlie Luce finally left. The structures are still there. 12 or so remain standing, sinking at different rates, covered in graffiti, slowly dissolving into the marsh. The island is now part of the Don Edwards San Francisco Bay National Wildlife Refuge. It is illegal to visit. The only legal view of Drawbridge is from a train passing through at speed or from a trail vista 0.2 miles away. You can see the Casper the Friendly Ghost mural painted on a sinking wall if you know which direction to look. Number 2. Amboy, San Bernardino County. Amboy sits in the middle of the Mojave Desert on Route 66, halfway between Barstow and Needles, next to a perfectly symmetrical extinct volcano called Amboy Crater. For 40 years, it was the last stop before the worst stretch of the old highway, the place you filled your gas tank, ordered pie at Roy's Motel and Cafe, and prepared for the desert. Roy's opened in 1938. For 2 decades, it was exactly the kind of neon-lit oasis that Route 66 mythology was made of. Gas, coffee, a motel, a phone. Amboy existed because geography required it. The next town east was Needles, and the next town west was Barstow, and both were far enough away that a car in 1940 might not make it without stopping. The town never had more than about 60 residents, but the highway kept it alive. Then Interstate 40 was built parallel to Route 66, 10 miles north of Amboy. The new highway bypassed the old road completely. When the Mojave section of I-40 opened in 1973, traffic on Route 66 through Amboy dropped by roughly 90% almost overnight. Roy's closed, the school closed, the post office closed. Amboy became a ghost town so fast that most of the furniture was still in the rooms when the doors were locked. In 2005, Amboy went on sale. The entire town, Roy's, the motel, the school, the church, the gas station, the houses, was listed on eBay. It sold for $425,000 to a buyer named Albert Okura, a fast food entrepreneur who owned a chain of chicken restaurants and believed Amboy could be saved. He reopened Roy's, fixed the neon sign, and tried for years to attract enough visitors to sustain it. The diner opened and closed several times. The motel rooms sit empty. Today, Roy's is open on most days, and a few people a year make the trip specifically to see it. The neon sign, two big red letters spelling ROYS, still glows at night in the middle of the Mojave. The crater is still there. The highway is still there. Amboy has a population of 4. Number 1, Barbed, Mariposa County. Barbed sat at the confluence of the Merced and Bear Rivers in Mariposa County, a gold rush camp that had been going since 1850 under the name Benton Mills. It served the gold mines upstream, processed ore, and survived the end of the rush by becoming a stagecoach stop and then a small railroad depot. By the early 1900s, the Yosemite Valley Railroad ran through, making Barbed a transit point for tourists heading into the Sierra Nevada. It was never large, a few hundred people at its peak, but it was continuous, a town that had been alive for over a century. In 1926, the original Exchequer Dam on the Merced River created a reservoir that covered part of the valley, but left Barbed intact. Then, in 1967, construction was completed on the new Exchequer Dam, nearly 4 times the height of the original, which quadrupled the size of Lake McClure. Barbed sat in the new flood zone. The few remaining residents left. The structures that couldn't be moved were left to the rising water. Lake McClure swallowed Barbed in 1967 and has kept it ever since. During severe drought years, when lake levels drop far enough, the foundations of the old stagecoach stop and depot emerge briefly from the water. Then the rains come back and Barbed disappears again. It has been underwater for over 50 years. Drop a comment with what part of California you're from. And if any of these places are connected to your family's history, we really want to hear it. Subscribe for more California history, and we'll see you in the next one.